Hello everyone, on yesterday's video I said that I didn't want to run a blink list until I found one that I felt like was really strong. And the problem I was running into with Hela decks was one, I don't have all of the discard components, and two, with Blink and Jubilee it all became really felt like a little bit inconsistent. You were almost gambling at what was going to pull out each time if you were going to accidentally pull into a card that was going to discard your Hela, and it just felt like it was a little bit of a detriment until I decided to test this build. This build is a Hela deck, but every single discard is targeted. There is not a single discard card in this deck that does a random card from your hand. And so with that, we have a lot more agency on when we draw Hela, making sure that we don't accidentally discard her. If we flip into a card with Blink, we know that we're not going to accidentally nuke our hand. So that works really well in our favor. The only downside that this has compared to some other Hela discard lists is that it doesn't have quite as much of a high roll. You have a lot more agency on what and where your power are going to fall, but you don't have just the absurd amount of power. And that's fine. Hela in any way, shape, or form is already going to put out a lot of power. You don't need to overkill it. Sometimes a Red Hulk would be nice, but it's not necessary by any means. And so today's deck, I'm really excited because it only has the Season Pass card, and everything else is very much acquirable. You don't have to have a Deep Series 4, Deep Series 5 collection. You can have a Series 3 complete, buy Blink, and you're ready to run this list. And that is something that I'm really excited about because not very many decks these days can do that. And so Blink in this list feels like a really good way to dig further into your deck to either make sure that you get some of those big power plays out onto the board, or to dig for Hela if you need to rotate and you're just shooting for that Hail Mary resummon, you have that option. We can either do a Blade plus a Blink on the last turn for that rotation tool. We can do Jubilee on 4 into Blink on 5. Sometimes we're going to do like a Calling Wing into a discard into a turn 5 Blink, which will rotate into like an Infinite, a Death, something that is much more impactful to be on the board. And you can usually control where that power is going to fall enough that you can compete for the lanes that you need to compete with. Overall, I've been having an absolute tear with this list. It's very easy to navigate, very easy to see your hand, know where you stand, know if you should snap, know if you should retreat. It doesn't require a lot of complex thinking, and sometimes that's nice in a deck, something that can almost feel like it's on autopilot with how consistent and how straightforward it is to run. And so we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. Thank you guys as always for being here. I hope you guys enjoy. Worst one, but not the best one either, because Black Cat would have been discarded anyways. Jubilee comes down, and it's going to hit our Giganto, which is a beautiful sight. That's going to be really tough to start being able to overcome, and it gives us a better chance to draw into Hela by the end of the game. And so we're going to have Dracula to help reach and get a little bit more onto the board. They have Daredevil, so they could be looking at like a Junk style or Cannonball. Go Calling Wing. We can go Calling Wing. That way they don't know exactly where we're wanting to resummon, maybe. Because that will let Dracula be part of the just the confusion with it. And so I think that's okay. Feeding into the potential RNG elements. Now Death is here. I'm not going to really get much value out of Death. If we draw into Lady Sif next turn, perfect. We can use that for a 5. If we draw into Blink, then we can use that to transition our Calling Wing out and something a little bit better in. So they go Nebula in the left lane. I mean, maybe they're looking at, I'm not sure what they're looking for. They can move their Jeff, but I think we're just going to go Lady Sif in the right lane. That's going to get rid of Death. Next turn, we're going to be able to resummon the Black Cat, the Dracula, and the Death. All targeted, all guaranteed hits. We don't have to worry about potentially drawing Hela early. We don't have to worry about whether we have it in hand or not. As soon as we draw it, we have a much better chance of winning. So they could move their Jeff out of the Starlight Citadel, use a Professor X there. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit tough to fully lock in a location. And so I think that's probably what they're doing here. Would be the Professor X line, right? No, it's an Iron Man line. Very interesting. And so it becomes pretty tough to overcome the Iron Man. But I guess no matter what, if something resummons in the left lane, that's perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and play Hela in the left lane. That gets us a little bit closer. And then Black Cat, Dracula, or Death all are going to be perfect in that left lane. And so Dracula in the left lane, and then Death in the left, or Dracula mid, Death in the left. We have Dracula coming down in the middle location, which I think could potentially win. No, it doesn't. We do lose the middle location, but we win left heavily, we win right heavily, and we will gladly take the 2 cubes. And all the while, no risk of discarding our Hela. So we're going to go ahead and take it. Let's jump into the next one. All right, next up we have Poly Enjoyer. And this time we do open with Hela in our hand, which is beautiful. We have Blink, we have Jubilee, so we can do Jubilee on 4 into a Blink on 5, potentially, depending on what cards are left. I don't think we're going to be at risk of discarding Hela at any point. We have Death that's going to protect us from like the Lady Sif play. The Calling Wing should always hit something else in our hand, I believe. And they're running a full-on Thanos build. And so I've seen a few of those floating around. They do decently, but they're not anywhere near as popular or overpowered as they once were. And so we'll see. They have the Space Stone. They have Jeff. Let's see what we can make happen. I almost want to skip here, because Calling Wing right now is a 50-50 between Black Cat and Jubilee. And so if we skipped, we could do Jubilee into a later Blink. And we have room to draw next turn, courtesy of the Black Cat. So I kind of like the idea. They have Mobius. We lose Black Cat, but I think it's okay. They snapped, maybe because we haven't played anything for the first few turns. Let's go Jubilee. No matter what we hit here, it's going to be a positive. Lady Sif will help us with our Death discard, Dracula, beautiful. The Giganto, the Infinite, all amazing resources for us. And so let's go Jubilee into Nova Roma. We have one more turn next turn, so maybe it's that we play both Blade and Calling Wing into the Hela resummon on 6. As long as they don't have a Professor X to lock in a location, then we should be relatively good. So the Jubilee is going to come down. Let's see what we end up hitting with it. The Dracula. I like that uncertain amount of power, because then for the opponent it becomes really tough to know exactly what we're planning to do. And so we can do Blade, Calling Wing. Blade is going to discard Giganto. Calling Wing is going to hit Blink, and then the Hela resummon is going to pull it back in. We'll either flip into Infinite or Lady Sif, whichever one we don't draw this turn, and then we have some really good hits for Dracula to pull into as well. And so I like our chances. As long as we're not looking at a Professor X lock, I think we're in a really, really good spot. So Blade coming down, this Calling Wing coming down, getting rid of Blink, that's going to allow this one to be potentially something even better, which with the Lady Sif, now Calling Wing, we know that when Hela resummons it, we can guarantee that this location is going to get that surge of the Calling Wing power. And so I think we play Hela into the right lane, and then it just pushes power to the rest of the board. Dracula has some potential good hits here. I don't think we're at risk of discarding any of these. The worst hit for Dracula is going to be 5, which is still not awful. I'm not going to snap back because I do want them to stay. As long as we don't get hit by a Cosmo or some kind of counter, we should be perfectly fine. They have the Odin, which sends so much stuff across the board. They have really spread their power out. The Infinite in the left lane is just such a beautiful thing from the Blink. We only get the 5 from Dracula. Our cards actually stack in the left lane, unfortunately, because if they had stacked here, would have been a little bit better. And then had this pulled into something a little bit bigger, we knew relatively well where that power was going to lie. We knew that this big behemoth was going to be in the left lane, guaranteed from the Blink resummon, which is why I kind of like that surge play rather than having it as that Electro rotation, because that is a very transparent, you know what's going to end up there, and the opponent does as well. Let's go ahead and take the 4, jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have my daughter's favorite character right now, Ghost Spider. The first location is Wakanda Demacy. We have Blade to discard the Magneto. Let's go ahead and play Blade into Wakanda just in case they're running some kind of Killmonger kit. We have the guaranteed discard from Blade. We have Jubilee on 4 into a Blink on 5, which is beautiful to see, and allows us a lot of flexibility in drawing into and pulling out of our deck. And so we draw into the Dracula. A lot of this deck is very straightforward. It's very easy to navigate. Nothing too fancy. No risk or bells and whistles with how and where you play your cards. There's some optimal ways to play them, but for the most part, it is relatively straightforward. And so the Triskelion is going to fill up our hand, which is unfortunate. We can do Wave into something like Doctor Doom. Kind of like it. Or we do Titania to stop the scaling from Nebula. But I kind of like the idea of saving Titania for a last turn Titania plus Blink play. And so let's go Wave. I think Doctor Doom is the direction we go with next. So they have their Hood. They do play a card into the Crimson Cosmos. So it has to be Jeff. With the Wave, they could be looking for a Professor X lock. And if so, this lane becomes the obvious choice. I think we still go Doctor Doom. We're looking to impact the board and the board state in a wide way. We're going to discard our Black Cat. Next turn, we can either go Dracula or Jubilee into a last turn Titania plus Blink if we don't get... Oh, so the Eliath comes down. Interesting. That could have been bad for the Doctor Doom. We get rid of Black Cat, and the Eliath came from the Triskelion. So with Calling Wing, that would discard our lowest cost card. Do we need to risk it? We have some really good pulls here with the Jubilee. So maybe it's just that we do Jubilee. Maybe we do one of these. That would put Titania on our side. If they play Professor X here, it locks this in place. Jubilee, they're not going to know exactly what that pulls. And I think we go Titania and then Jubilee. But I like this. It makes it really tough for them to pinpoint exactly where that power should go. I'm not going to snap into it because they do have the Daredevil read, which means we have to plan our snaps a little bit earlier if we want to snap on them. I don't like snapping into a Daredevil. I feel like that you have to have a very specific read of what you're trying to do. So they do go mid. This could be a Professor X, and if so, it becomes very, very tough. The Hela resummon, and so Magneto in the left lane, Black Cat, it pushes our Hela over to the right. So it's a very specific amount of power in the left, very specific amount of power in the right, and Blink would hit our Jubilee, because otherwise it's Dracula and Hope, and I don't like our game plan being that's just Hope. And then they still have to overcome a lot of power in the left and the right lane. And so Blink, please get us like the Infinite or the Death. The Infinite is beautiful to see. The Demon coming down in the left lane. They do bounce Titania onto their side, so they steal that one away. But we hold in the middle location. We hold in the right location. And we are able to take the 2 cubes away. All right, next up we have Jimmy. The first location is Xandar. We are going to go ahead and skip because all we have are our high cost cards. But as we get those targeted discards, even though we have Hela in hand, we won't have to worry. We can play them freely and not have to worry about discarding our Hela. And so they have the Angela, could be running a Loki deck, could be running a like kind of somewhat movement style build. There's a few different variations of decks that are running Angela right now. So like a Kitty Pryde, Hope Summers style. There's Elsa Bloodstone. That kind of intro 4-card package fits into a lot of other decks as well. So the movement, the Loki, it's just a very versatile, flexible kind of play. So Calling Wing would be scary here. I mean, it'll hit our Blade, but if we played both, it would be scary. So I think we're gonna go ahead and skip. We may gamble with the Calling Wing next turn. Potentially, or with Blade next turn. I guess Calling Wing would be the gamble. But it really depends on if we need to or not. And so they do fill up this middle location with the Angela, with the Jeff. We have Dracula. So Dracula into Blade is by no means huge. But Dracula is going to guarantee pull into something of value. They get a lot of energy from the White Hot Room. And with US Agent, I don't know why that's so tough for me to say. That's going to be pretty rough. They have Valentina, they have Kitty Pryde, and so with that extra energy, they can do a lot of things. And so Dracula mid right now has a good hit, a guaranteed good hit. we have the blink, which when we resummon Calling Wing is going to hit that. And so this is guaranteed either 14 or 20, which is beautiful to see. I think we're going to go Hela. That will resummon a few cards. It's not overwhelming the number of cards, but it can be enough to kind of change those games back in our favor. We're going to need something to pop up into Xandar, I think. Ideally, one in Xandar, one in Stark Tower, but we'll see. The big Kitty Pryde in mid pushes them up to 27. The Agent Coulson, which we're not really competing for that location, the US agent is going to make it tough. And then Mobius comes down. We have Hela for the resummon. Where do those cards go? We don't need it to go in the White Hot room, unfortunately. And then the death in the left lane is okay. And then Infinite getting pulled in mid is going to give us that advantage back in our favor. And even though there's not a lot of cards that we played, a lot of cards that we discarded, the ones that we do because of that targeted nature are high value. So we'll take the 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Zinrius. And the peak comes down, which is beautiful for something like Calling Wing. I'm going to go ahead and use Blade, though. We're not going to let them know, or Jubilee. I don't know why I said Calling Wing. We're going to use Blade. It's going to discard the Blink. And then I don't want to use Jubilee just yet, just in case we pull into Hela. I don't want to do that right away. They have a Pixie and the beautiful rolling the dice emoji. That's the first time I've seen anyone have that. I don't know how you unlock it, but it's a good one. And we would have pulled into Hela, so I'm glad we waited on the Jubilee. Now we could do Jubilee, but if we pulled into, I guess, Lady Sif, but where'd Lady Sif go? Oh, Lady Sif is in our hand. So Calling Wing would discard Lady Sif, Dracula, Black Cat, all of them are fantastic. Let's go Jubilee into mid. We don't have to worry about accidentally losing our Hela from the Jubilee pool, which is beautiful. It allows us a lot more freedom and really concise pinpoint plays. So the Giganto in mid is beautiful. We now have Dracula, which is also a fantastic one to play on 4. Lady Sif on 5, if we draw into death, could be really good. And then we're only going to be resummoning a few cards, 1 or 2. We can't Lady Sif anymore. I guess we could into like a Blink, but let's go Dracula into the peak, because negative zone is pretty tough. Dracula into the peak. We have a pretty good Stark Tower location already. It might be that we do the pig into the middle location on turn number 5. Or we can just go Black Cat. I like the idea of doing the pig, though. And the reason for that is it's going to make sure that we thin out our cards. We're going to lose the Black Cat. Hela is going to resummon Blink, and so the pig is going to rotate into one of these 3, all of which are going to be fantastic hits. And so I think we play the pig into the negative zone begrudgingly. And then I think Hela here is going to help us bring it the rest of the way home. And the reason I don't really care about playing pig into mid is we don't really need it to get any additional power, because we're going to rotate it back into our deck when we play Hela anyways. So they go magic to extend the game. We don't have any way to control those resummons. So interesting. I think we just skip here. They skipped as well. So we could play the Infinite outright, but I think we go Hela. That's going to rotate this into death, so it's going to be a guaranteed at least 18 here. That's going to resummon a few cards. Only, what, 2? Only 2 cards onto the board, but the 2 cards that are resummoned are going to be pretty impactful. And so Blink rotating this is going to be big. Dracula has 2 really good chances of pulling into something big, and then 1 potential dud that we're not going to be able to get rid of. But they play 2 cards, 1 left, 1 in mid. We have Blink rotating this card into death. Black Cat resummons here, which is unfortunate. The Infinite into the Taskmaster is big. We needed something. We needed an Infinite of our own to tie this location. The Pixied Infinite was big. Had Black Cat resummoned anywhere else but here, we would have been able to win. Or had Infinite pulled into the peak, we would have been able to win that way as well. There were several outs that we had to overcome even this high roll that they hit, but we weren't quite able to do it. It's okay. Some losses are going to happen. At least it was only 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right. Next up, we have Captain Compost. We do have Blade, so that's going to get rid of our Magneto. We have Blink, so we have some pretty good lines here. We have Hela in hand, but we don't have to worry about accidentally discarding her. We have Nebula coming down on their end. It could be the like Sentry Annihilus line, which does become kind of scary to play against because we can't really flood too much too early, but what we do get on the board is typically pretty high impact. And so Nebula is going to scale quite dramatic. Oh, this could be the Spectrum ongoing list as well. For Spectrum ongoing, we have to worry about a potential Cosmo counter being the biggest detriment for us. So we can go Lady Sif. It's going to pull over into Astrodim anyways. So actually, I think we're going to play it into Kiln just in case they do like Cosmo. Their Cosmo would end up here. This would allow us to still get the discard with Lady Sif, even though she's going to pull over into the Astrodim. And so they go Nocturne. They're going to be able to change a location if they want to. Could be New York. I guess we should have played Lady Sif into New York so that Nebula didn't scale as much. Oh well. So I think we skip here, let Black Cat discard. On 5, we can rotate the Lady Sif into a Giganto or Infinite, whatever's left. Or I guess it could be Dracula or Jubilee as well. And then Hela to resummon a card on the last turn is what we're shooting for. Obsidian Coal is a big one in New York, making it pretty difficult to win in Asteroid M, I suppose. But we do have some high power cards coming into play. And then their Kiln location, I think they intend to move the Nocturne over. And so we can go Blink into New York. That's going to allow us to change Lady Sif into either Dracula, Giganto, or Infinite. All of them are fantastic. Dracula probably the least so. Nocturne changes New York, so that's perfectly fine. Jubilee becomes a 1/4. They have Debris, so they cap out their left location. Dazzler comes down, so that's big on them. Our Blink is going to change that left location into the Infinite, and so we grab that one. Jubilee could pull into some decent cards here. But as far as our resummons go, I think doing a Hela gives us a chance to fight for this lane. If we do a Hela in the left lane, that's going to give them 6 extra, and then they would need 7 more. 6 if they do a Spectrum. So I think we're okay with just the Hela in the left lane. Let's go ahead and lock it in. We are going to enable Mojo's bonus, but I think that's okay. Blue Marvel comes down, which is not as marvelous. We do win the left lane by 1. We do pull a lot of their cards with Magneto. So depending on where the rest of these cards resummon at, Nor Dimension comes down because we moved their Nocturne. We are able to stack into the middle location with Black Cat and Death. We overcome the left lane, overcome mid, and we will grab the 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into one more. All right, next up we have good old Fudge. The first location is Dark Dimension, so if we wanted to, we could just play out our discard cards over there and then let it roll eventually. They did have Black Cat discard, so they're running a Hela resummon deck as well. Theirs might be a little bit more high roll than ours. So with Dark Dimension, they may benefit from that location a little bit more. Ours is typically very consistent, but a moderate amount of power. It doesn't go too heavy in any one direction. So that hurts all of our big cards dramatically. We do have Dracula that will be able to pull into one of them, but it's not a beautiful thing. I'm gonna hide Lady Sif into the left lane. I'm hoping it hurt their play line as well. They lost their Corvus, we lost our Blink. Perfectly fine as long as it wasn't the Hela. We are absolutely okay with that. We can now go Calling Wing. I almost think maybe we hide Dracula as well. And then that way we have a pretty good surge of power in the left lane. And then it just comes down to whatever happens. Whatever may be will be. I'm going to go ahead and play Dracula into the left lane. Right now they don't know what kind of deck we're running. And so it'll be a surprise whenever we do finally reveal. I guess the only bad thing is Dracula is going to rotate with Blink. And so it's not the perfect ideal line. We will be able to get Death out. Their Red Hulk is huge. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. We're going to go Hela in the left lane. That should give us quite a bit. Lady Sif plus Calling Wing. Their Lady Sif hits their Death. Their Hela resummons. Puts Corvus into the right lane, which hits their Infinite and Red Hulk. beautiful that they did not have that down on the board. Their death pops back up. Their Black Cat, we did not have as many discards as they did. We do have the death. We also have an awful Giganto, which could have been equally likely to be able to beat Magneto or Infinite. We have the Giganto, death, and then Blink is going to change the Dracula, but there was nothing higher, and so nothing could have switched out. We are able to hold down the two here, or the two lanes in left and mid. What an awful game. It's one of those that you just kind of let run on autopilot and then hope for the better result. All right, next up we have Tavo Boy, and I'm having a hard time getting any kind of game that's more than like a 1-cube wager going. Every time I snap, they end up retreating, or if I don't have the ideal line, then it hurts us as well. So the Nexus is in the middle location. We can throw and kind of protect that with like a Dracula. That way we lose initiative until the final turn and then hope to absorb something big. Depending on what they have. If they have a Nocturne, there could be a scenario where they change the Nexus location. We have Blink, but other than that, we don't really have much else that we can use. So they go Magic. They do change the Nexus location. They don't even feign it or delay it at all. They go ahead and get it done. And then they snap here. So Jubilee could potentially pull Lady Sif and potentially discard our Hela. And so I want to protect against that. Let's go Dracula into... I'm going to go Dracula into Monster Metropolis. That way we have a chance to fight for it being the highest power card there after it absorbs something. And so Widow's Kiss plus the Nebula, they could just be running a good kind of counter style build. With this, we still run the risk of pulling Lady Sif, but now we have death to kind of protect it. And so I like the idea of doing Jubilee here. We pull into something, and then next turn on 6, as long as they're not looking like they're going to rip that location away, never mind, we're not going to Jubilee pull. As long as they're not looking like they're going to rip that location away, we could blink and change it out, but that doesn't appear to be the case. So doing Calling Wing here will help us guarantee that we get a good fit into the Dracula. And so when we resummon, we're going to resummon just Black Cat and just Blink. And so it's going to come down to, one, a potential good rotation. Ooh, the Doc Ock, if they have Shang-Chi, could be kind of detrimental. And because we are going to get Blink before Calling Wing goes off, actually, Jubilee was the last one we played. So we have a lot of power here. All of this is within Shang-Chi range. You know, I actually don't think many of these run Shang-Chi. I think it's Cannonball more specifically, and so that would take away a 12. That'd still be 12, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 18, 23. We could tie this one. I think we're okay with that. If this is Cannonball, then we're going to resummon Giganto, resummon Black Cat. Cannonball comes down. We should be, if my math is right, it should be a tie here. And then we win the point differential. We're fighting for the point differential, which Dracula is going to pull into the Infinite, and we are going to overcome that. Knowing their deck decently, we were able to kind of make that calculated decision of if we should stay, if we should retreat, and we're able to get the 4 cubes out of the really strong line, but also very standard, very easy to anticipate. We're getting really close to infinite for the season. By the time I record the next video, we should easily be there. And so thank you guys as always for being here. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.